What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the PickSwap Media YouTube channel. My name is Sean Barnard as usual, and I'm excited to announce that for this video, we have partnered with WHOP.com, WHOP.com. WHOP is an all-in-one marketplace for sports communities and other digital products. If you're looking to find communities on all things sports, sports capping, sports betting, and sports fandom, head to WHOP.com/sports. They're the all-in-one digital marketplace, the Amazon of the future for digital products. I'm incredibly proud and excited to be partnering, so make sure to go check that out. You can click the link in our description and our comments. Thank you to WAP for sponsoring this video, and thank you to you guys for tuning in.
Check it out.
Step back, James Harden, right on target. Bang, bang, George Niang to Paul Reed from Tyrese Maxey.
Joel
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Pick Swap podcast. Big week for Philadelphia sports this past week. So Sean and I will be catching up today on all the good stuff. Sean, how you doing, brother?
Yeah, life can't get much better, man. I mean, absolute domination by the Eagles, just destroying the Giants. In the midst of that, the Sixers putting forth one of their most impressive wins of the season, going 5-0 on the West Coast trip. Sixers are getting that national recognition a little bit for being contenders. So things are looking up all around here.
Yeah, it's a kind of an inverse of what we've seen this Sixers team do. But man, they've really caught their swing here. We'll go over a little bit of the road trip stuff. We'll talk about the 5 games that they were able to win on the road. A lot of impressive wins there, nonetheless. And then we'll also just go into later in the episode, talk a little bit about the impending trade deadline that's coming up in a couple of weeks and what the Sixers may or may not be active in coming up here. So to go back a little bit. 5-0 on this road trip. Obviously, going into the last game against the Kings, so you get big wins over both LA teams, Portland, Utah, and then you get against Sacramento, who's right now the third best team in the Western Conference record-wise. You have James Harden and Joel Embiid out. Kind of feels like one of those scheduled losses, right? That the Doc has talked about in the past. 2 of your best players out, your top 2 players out. Tyrese Maxey comes in, puts up 32 points, game high, and they end up sneaking away a victory late in that game after being down 21 at one point. This is a non-Sixers type win, right? This is a very fun one. A lot of Tyrese Maxey action, a lot of other guys get involved. As a whole, tell me about the road trip, and then kind of specifically about that Kings game.
Yeah, I did not fully expect them to go 5-0, so they exceeded my expectation with that. The Kings game for me is kind of that exclamation point, even though it is without the Harden and Embiid duo. We're still seeing growth in that. We're still seeing those two improving, getting better together. And then that Kings game is just that we've seen that game like a million times, and it's always a Sixers loss. It's like this is the one we just give them away, and I that was kind of the mindset going in. It's like, all right, we'll take that one off. And this Kings team is no joke. The De'Aaron Fox and Domas Sabonis combo is very fun to watch. The Light the Beam gang. They've got a ton of fun players on that team, and they're winning in the Western Conference for a reason. And to see the Sixers team scrap from all the way down, that to me is something that's a notable change and a takeaway that even though being down 21, even though not particularly playing well to start that game, to find a way to just scrap out of it, to see this team kind of show those guts. Tobias Harris, I thought, played very well again. Got some all-around contributions from everybody, some good minutes off the bench. So it's good to see that mentality, to never quit, and they pulled it off. And it was nice to see Maxey running the show again.
Yeah, it was definitely nice seeing him get back in his swing, and something we've talked about over the last couple episodes of just waiting for him to get back to full form. It seemed like he was definitely there on Saturday evening. Like you said, I think 5 in a row is impressive no matter where you are. But being on the West Coast, playing teams that are good, like the Clippers were essentially full strength at that point. The Lakers have been playing well, not to discredit them too much. Portland's a good team. Utah is, they're Utah, but then you get to go play Sacramento, and then you have a great gutty win against a really good Sacramento team. And like you said, I think this team is kind of finding a weird stride, not just with the fantastic duo of Embiid and Harden in the way that they've been able to connect and start playing really well together, but now you're getting a lot of contributions from elsewhere. And we'll kind of dive into that a little bit more as we go here. But the Sixers have now moved themselves up into sole possession of second in the Eastern Conference after
Yeah.
being 12-12 at one point this season. When you and I are looking at each other saying, like, what the hell is going on? What is this team? The expectations are, so much better than this. They are playing really good basketball right now, and it seems to be happening at the right time. We're talking about here going into late January, hitting the All-Star break, and then the trade deadline. A lot to happen over these next couple of weeks. Obviously, there are still holes to fill, and that's going to be the issue at hand here going into this later trade deadline. Is there anything that stuck out, even with the victories over the last couple, weeks that you're seeing? Other teams that have pieces kind of slipping loose and holes you see that the Sixers need to fill in this roster?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, we're starting to see the movement. The February 9th deadline is coming up. Roy Hachimura, that trade went down where he's heading to
Yep.
the Lakers. So a little bit of progress, at least pieces moving. I do think it tends to always be kind of one of those things where once the first shoe falls, then everything starts to follow.
Yeah.
The market starts to get set. I do think the Rudy Gobert trade like genuinely messed up the trade market. Like I think the values are all out of whack, and which this is intentional by the NBA. The playing games have kind of made less teams sellers. I feel like there's more teams still in the mix than it feels, especially in the Western Conference where things are completely open. I
Yeah.
haven't looked at the standings today, but as of a couple days ago, I believe it was the 3rd seed and 11th seed were separated by less than 3 games, which is just nutty stuff
Yeah.
there. How rapid you can climb that. So it's going to be interesting to see who falls through. There's a lot of kind of guys bouncing around. I'll get into real quick the Sixers kind of tax situation, and there's been a lot of talk about the wanting to avoid the luxury tax. And now, granted, this is not me sticking up for Josh Harris and his $6.1 billion net worth that they should do this, but that does seem to be where the mindset is from. And it is worth mentioning that there's a repeater tax, meaning it gets more and more expensive each year. So avoiding it this year could come in handy looking down the line, and especially how close they are. Looking at where they sit, they're 1.178 million over the luxury tax right now. They are 5.5 million underneath the hard cap, which is when they hit that number, they're done making moves. So there's a little bit of wiggle room, and they still only have 14 players on the roster. So there is an open roster spot. The mindset between cutting Charles Bassey and Isaiah Joe was for that flexibility, for something to become available. So I believe it would be a massive waste if there is not some sort of move and there's something that's got to be happening. So in my mind, like as much as it's been quiet, there's absolutely something brewing for the Sixers team.
Yeah, and I think that this actually comes at a really nice time for them. I think that they can evaluate this team pretty sternly and honestly, just because you've seen the ups and downs, and you're seeing this core. The core that's there is it's pretty clear,
Mhm.
and the additions can be supplementary to that group. And I think there's obvious holes in certain areas, and there's places to upgrade, and you have the opportunity and the ability to do that not only with you know like you said, the open roster spot there. I think that there's players out there to be had, and as we're getting closer to this deadline, we're hearing a little bit more chatter from around the league. I wanted to go back and point out a little bit. The Kings are 6 games back of first place, and the Lakers, who are currently in 12th place, are 11 games back
So
of first
five
place.
games.
So
Okay.
5 games separate the third and the 11th or 12th seed in the West, which is pretty insane. You look at the defending champions, the Warriors, who are in the 10th seed, are 23 and 24 and 10 games behind. So really not a lot of separation there. Have no idea what the second half of this season looks like for them. The Sixers are 4.5 games back of first place in second. Then the Bucks and Nets 3 and 4 there as well. So a lot of things are going to shake up here. It's still a lot of basketball to play. Not getting too ahead of ourselves here, but as we're looking at this Sixers team, there's not too much capital that they have to move here. I think that's the biggest restriction. You talk about obviously the luxury tax, which you mentioned, but there's also, you don't have a lot of first round picks, don't have a
Right.
lot of picks in general, and you don't have a lot of movable contracts, that are worth moving in terms of, the value that they bring to this team. Really, the guys you're looking at here are Furkan, Matisse Thybulle, Jaden Springer is going to be in that mix as well. As much as I don't necessarily want to see him go, I think that he's going to be a name that comes up here and there. And then, is there anyone else that you're considering on that block as well?
Shake Milton, I would kind of lump in that conversation. I think there's a chance that he could see his name. And these are all guys that are not high like contract guys, which makes it a difficult. Obviously the financial constraints of the NBA trade rules make it hard. When you look at this Sixers cap space, and I'll get the numbers exact, like there's so much money tied up in the top end when you look at the Joel Embiid and James Harden, who are both obviously untouchable. Then we got Tobias Harris, who I'm going to circle back to in a minute. And then PJ Tucker is the next highest at 10.5 million a year. And Tyrese Maxey's the next big trade piece, and you're not giving up on him unless it's for like a legitimate star coming back. So you're pretty handcuffed in what you're doing. And to circle back to Tobias, I guess when I was kind of going through my trade prep and looking at things, I think I'm officially team keep Tobias. I don't
Yeah.
know if there's another guy that I think we can replace from a 3-and-D style of player that can do it at a higher level than he has been this year. So it's weird that we're in this spot. He's always going to be overpaid, but I'm happy Tobias is on this team, and I think he deserves to stick it out this season.
I'm with you, man. I think the entire city genuinely has kind of moved into that category. I'm sure there's some people out there, but I would tend to think that those people aren't really watching too closely at what he's been able to do this year. He's been fantastic. Again, moving roles, being adaptable in all facets of the game. I enjoy Tobias. I know we've kind of got on this roller coaster ride with him, and we've been at different places at different times with Tobias. But as of right now, I think he's a really important key piece to this team. And I really do. I don't think there's a world where we see him move this year.
Mhm.
I think he's going to play out his contract here, which is so funny to think about because over the last 2 seasons, there was points in time where we were just like, they're way more likely to take him with 2 years or 1 year left on his contract. So to say that out loud and be confident in that, I think is a funny place to have come to. But basically, what you're rolling out here is these are going to be pieces within the margins, guys here and there that might help you, bolster the bench, change certain rotations, add a certain, a different facet to this team. Go through those guys. I guess we can kind of dive right into that now. I know you have a list of guys that we can discuss here and what the trade packages might be for that.
Yeah, so we'll start out with was reported today, Doug McDermott. The asking price seems to be 2 second-round picks per Mike Scotto of Hoops Hype, $13.75 million cap hit, which makes it a little bit difficult to reach, but definitely possible. How do you feel about Dougie McBuckets?
I've been a Doug fan for a long time, man. I think in 2013 I was a fan of Doug McDermott. So he is what he is. I think it's pretty clear what you're getting with him, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't say that as a bad thing. Good shooter, movement shooter, a guy that within your offense, he adds a layer that I don't think you necessarily have. Now you have good shooters. Anthony Melton's a good shooter. This guy is a shooter, period. That's what he does, right? You haven't had a guy like that really. I guess you could Seth Curry was that dude. But like you don't have that type of player on this team. And in offense with James Harden, that guy eats up for
Yeah.
sure. So I love that. If you're able to do that, somehow you have to match the money. It's not an easy thing to do here. And you talk about what you're giving up. Uh, it's considerable. But if you're able to do some sort of 3-team, make the money work, I love Doug McDermott. He's been an almost Sixer a few times. I feel like we've talked about him a couple times over the years.
Yeah, and so to look at the Sixers salary kind of table here, so the popular names are obviously Furkan, who's got a $5 million cap hit, Matisse, who's $4.3 million cap hit, 4.37, so almost 4.4. The guy right above these two is DeAnthony Melton at 8.5. How off the table is DeAnthony Melton in trade talks in your mind?
I think he's firmly off the table. I really don't think that there's a situation where you move him again, unless you're upgrading significantly. I
Mhm.
think DeAnthony Melton should be. I think he should be a long-term piece here. I know we all like him a lot, but I think he's a guy that you should look to keep around for a good period of time. I don't think he's on the table this trade deadline.
Yeah, he's still young, incredible value contract. I do think there's some outlook, if I try and channel my Daryl Morey brain, that you
Yeah.
could look at kind of selling high on him now. I do think he's come down to earth a little bit from the way he started the season, but still like a very positive player regardless, and a very necessary player for what they need. So not a guy I'm itching to move, but when I do look down all these names, it's a kind of money wise name that makes a lot of sense for trying to match it. But it would take for me, it would take a significant player to make it worth it. So I agree with you on that front. We'll switch gears to a guy that you brought up right before this, Malik Beasley. And this is, again, a tough bargain with the $15 million price range. I think he would be terrific. Talk to me about your guy.
Yeah, Malik Beasley, a guy I think in this whole, this summer when you talked about the movement that happened with, you mentioned the Rudy Gobert trade and how that screwed everything up. He's a guy that came out of that and I think has upped his value since. Great shooter, willing shooter, will just jack it up at any time. And he's a considerable defender as well. He's a guy that can come in, be a legitimate 3-and-D kind of guy. And we know that those labels get thrown around a lot. and most of the times they're not legitimate. I feel like a lot of guys get labeled as 3 and D, and I don't think that they're proficient on both ends, in both the 3 and the D. I think he's a guy that's able to do both. And I think he's a guy, again, when you put him in these mixes and these rotations alongside playmaking guards, in situations where there's going to be a ton of space and he can just kind of eat up off of that, like Malik Beasley a lot here. Another athlete as well. You talk about the guys that get up and down the floor here. That you don't have enough athletes on this team. He's a guy that brings that athletic value as well. So again, 15 million is a lot to match, and it would take a lot. Don't think it's going to happen just based on that alone, but would love him here if it were somehow made possible.
Yeah, only player in the NBA with more 3-pointers off the bench than Georges Niang this year, which is pretty
Wow.
cool.
Yeah.
Georges Niang, who's turned into the absolute man.
Great.
So, yeah, I would love him. I think he'd be a great fit. I don't necessarily see it happen just because of the financial hurdle. Another guy that's commonly brought up, and I still see the same issues with the finances, is Eric Gordon. And this has been another kind of Rockets 2.0 kind of guy. I will say I do think Eric Gordon has some juice left. He looks like when I've seen the Rockets play, he's looked more spry than I guess I came in expecting, and it is an absolute mess down in Houston. I would like for him to get freed and go to a team where he can contribute to winning somewhere. I don't necessarily think it's the Sixers, but what are your thoughts there, James?
Yeah, I really haven't considered Eric Gordon much ever since really we came into this season, and I'm sure that they kicked the doors on
Oh yeah,
on Eric Gordon plenty of times to find out that it's just not going to happen. So he hasn't really been a guy that I've considered too heavily this season just because the money doesn't work, and he gets paid too much for what he does. Like he's a guy that just makes too much money. If there was a world where he gets bought out, I think that it's highly likely that he ends up here out of all places. But man, I don't really think Eric Gordon's going to end up in a Sixer uniform. Although, like you said, with how terrible that team is down there and the culture seems brutal from
yeah.
what the stories that have come through over the last couple months. He's surprisingly been playing well, but I don't think he ends up here.
Yeah, I do think the Rockets need a culture change down there. And this is kind of the last year where they can kind of let these guys just kind of run the coop or whatever.
Yeah.
But you got to switch gears a little bit because there's a lot of just poor, not fun to watch basketball being played. And I get there in the tanking portion of it, but just not good vibes
Not
down there at
great.
all. But yeah, Eric Gordon, $19.5 million cap hit. So yeah, that's tough to
Dude.
reach. That's brutal at this point.
How old is he?
I want to say 32. He's younger than I thought he was.
Yeah, that's not as bad.
Yeah,
But
but
still.
yeah, so it doesn't make sense to me. Another guy who has held out all season and very interesting kind of situation is Jay Crowder, who I've been a Jay Crowder guy for much of my basketball watching fandom. I don't know how I feel about his fit on the Sixers though. What do you think about Crowder?
Yeah, I don't know. Not a great shooter.
He's got that
Tenacious
dog.
guy, got the dog in him, right? But I think that this is a very much a copy paste PJ Tucker, right? Like doesn't do that much other than he doesn't fill the stat sheet. And you can really only have one of those guys on your team that just doesn't add that much statistical value. I think Jay Crowder is a good player. I think he does add value somewhere. For whatever he's going to cost to bring in, I think it's going to be too much just because I also haven't seen him play basketball in almost a year, right? Like it's been a long time. Not to say that he can't play anymore. I'm sure he can. I'm sure he's been staying healthy and working out and doing everything that he's doing. But Jay Crowder, I could see it happening, and if it happens, I'm not going to be mad necessarily. And from what I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, the asking price hasn't been too high, right?
I would assume not, considering he's literally not playing basketball right now. It's going to be a weird one. Like, I don't really know what their market or what they're going to look for in this. The Suns are also in kind of a strange place this year and what
True.
their outlook is on the season. So I don't know. It also is not super encouraging to me that he basically kind of threw a hissy fit about getting sent to the bench and being asked to be a six man. But I don't know. I feel kind of similarly that I like Jay Crowder. I was very pro Jay Crowder before the PJ Tucker signing. For me, now we're getting too much of the same thing with the Tucker, the Tobias, the Jay Crowder, just kind of repetitive in the fit. And it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up because I do think he'll find his way to a contender.
Yeah, and I'm sure, whatever it is, wherever he does go, I'm sure it will be a team that's considering themselves to be contending for a championship this season, whether that's, I've heard Miami, he's already played on a million teams.
Yeah.
But a guy that does have playoff and finals experience, a guy that has been around and played with a bunch of great guys, and I'm sure fit into a locker room, some sort of like, I'm sure he's able to handle that, right? I don't know the stories that have been thrown in back and forth between him and Phoenix this year. Who knows really what's true? And
Yeah.
again, I don't think Phoenix is a place where, things are all dandy right now. Clearly things are not going that great on multiple fronts. So I think I'm not it's not even really the sitting out. It's not really the whatever that whole situation is. It's more just like I don't think fit wise in terms of the players that they already have on this roster. I just don't think that he's a necessary addition for what he'll cost to come over here.
Yeah, Phoenix is weird, dude. And we both went out on the limb on the DeAndre Ayton limb after this signing.
Yeah.
I don't think we're wrong on the talent aspect by any means. I think talent wise, he's right up there with the best centers in the league. But there's got to be something so attitude wrong with him. Like you can just
He
see it in
doesn't
the way.
care.
Yeah, he doesn't care, and his teammates just don't seem to like him at all. Like there'll be plays where he has like a nice bucket, and the guys aren't even cheering, guys aren't high fiving, aren't even looking at him.
No.
So yeah, not a good vibes guy whatsoever. It seems.
Yeah.
We'll move on to another one. I have a soft spot for this guy. I don't think you're gonna like him, but talk to me about Patrick Beverly at a $13 million asking price.
Yeah, I like Pat Bev, man.
Okay.
I mean, they don't have a backup point guard, really, right? So I don't mind it. I don't mind it. He's a guy that, again, gonna push buttons.
Oh yeah.
Uh, has playoff experience. He carried the Timberwolves to the play-in game last year. And they had. I love that video of him getting up on this scores table, throwing his jersey and whatever. Pat Bev is the man now. I think. I know you like him, and I haven't always been a huge fan of Pat Bev, but I think he brings a valuable aspect to this team, and in a similar way to Jay Crowder and PJ Tucker on that end. But he does play a different position and a position that they are looking for. I don't know what his idea of his role is. I think that's something that you'd have to talk through with him because I don't know if he expects to be starting or if he expects to be coming off the bench, but also a Doc guy, right? He's played for Doc
Yeah.
and loved Doc and has talked highly of Doc Rivers. So I think the fit would be seamless. I think that he'd be a guy that would come in and have a positive impact and be a guy on those nights where, shit's not going right. I think he's going to make sure people hear about it. And I don't think that's ever a problem in a locker room. So another James Harden guy, another former Rocket. Why not?
Yeah, I think he's a team first guy. I think he would buy in. I think Philadelphia would absolutely love him. It'd be interesting. I'm interested to see where he ends up because I think there's a pretty likely chance it's not in Los Angeles by the end of the year. He's kind of getting phased out of the rotation. He started this year shooting extremely poorly from the field. He's kind of rebounded a little bit, but it's very down off what he was. He was last season with the Timberwolves. He shot a pretty high percentage from three. I want to say it was like 38% off the top of my head. If you could fact check me there if you want to. Yeah, but to the point where I was like, his antics are kind of distracting from the point where he's actually like a valuable basketball player and contributing in a winning way. A guy that's never missed the playoffs in his career. I like Pat Bev. I think it would be awesome as a rotation. That number is still a little hard, and I think it would take some finessing probably in a multi-team deal, but I think he would be awesome in a Sixers uniform.
So for his career, he shoots almost 38% from three. Right now, he's shooting just under 34. He shot a little over 34 last year, but the year before his last year with the Clippers, he shot 39.7% on 4 attempts per game. Right now, he's averaging just under 6 points. But again, last year, he was averaging 9 points, 4.6 assists, a steal, and 0.9 blocks per game. Like the defensive metrics are there. He would be a good guy to play off the bench. Let me look at his minutes really quick if I can find it.
And
He's playing
I'll take that.
25 minutes a night.
Yeah,
which is a lot.
Absolutely take that. And he wouldn't play that much here. But in like especially if they are going to move on from Shake, which I think is on the table, I would absolutely take Patrick Beverly as a guy to plug and play. He would bring it. And I still, as much like PJ Tucker hasn't been necessarily like the infectious, stir things up as much as I think I've hoped. Pat Beverly absolutely would, like way more in your face, way more bring the energy. And I think guys like Joel Embiid would feed off that and it would be helpful. And I would love it if it happens. It's going to be tough to make happen, but yeah, we'll move on to another guy, guy I'm not as high on, but Cam Reddish has seen his name in trade talks all the time. I know he's a local guy, $5.95 million cap hit come from the Knicks. What's your thoughts on Cam?
I think I don't know, man. I like Cam. I think he's a good player. I think that he needs to find a place where he can actually play though. And it's not going to be here. For a guy that I think his skill set is super valuable. He's a lengthy wing, primary scorer type of guy. I think he's got to go. Like, I wish a team that could actually play him and will be willing to work through his mistakes and all the stuff that's going to happen as a young player. I wish there was a team out there that would do that for him. The Sixers are not that team. They're not in a position to let him play through mistakes and be a young kid and do what he's going to do. So while he's probably not too expensive to go get, I don't think his trade value is too high. I saw, 1 second-round pick or maybe 2 at the most. I wish a team like, I don't know, whether it's OKC or one of those teams at that level would go get
Houston.
him. But yeah, Houston, whatever it is. I just don't think that it's here where he would be able to flourish. I think he's just going to go be another. If he came here, it'd be another thing where not getting playing time, not able to work through mistakes, not fitting in the system necessarily super well. This doesn't seem like a match here. Although I do hope for the best for him. I hope he gets out of New York as soon as he can.
Yeah, if you're not cracking the rotation with Tom Thibodeau, the New York Knicks, you're not cracking the rotation with Doc Rivers and the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah,
It's not going to be the case. And
yeah,
I think he would be like a good, like, buy low kind of guy for a team,
yeah,
like you mentioned. The video that always sticks in my head is of that draft class when they're asking who the toughest guy to guard is. And like all these all these players about to be drafted are all saying Cam Reddish. There's a video of
yeah.
Maxey and Anthony Edwards both kind
Man,
of talking about how hard he is to guard and stuff. And that kind of stuff like sticks with me. It's like he's a guy that seems to have way more respect from his peers than like fans or coaches, whatever, around the league, which
yeah,
I don't know how much you want to take it with a grain of salt, whatever. But yeah, I don't think the Philadelphia 76ers are the spot for him. I'll move on to my last name here, and then I'm going to throw 3 trades at you and see what you think of these. Reggie Bullock from the Mavericks, $10 million cap hit. It does work with the trade of Thibault and Furkan for Bullock. What do you think of Reggie?
yeah. I think if you asked me this time last year, I would have been like, hell yeah, like right now. I
Mhm.
still think that's a positive trade if you're thinking about like 2-for-1 Thibault and Korkmaz for Reggie Bullock. I think he is a really valuable player off the bench and a guy that could, slide in the lineup or a rotation immediately and really, I don't know what his playoff experience is like. Not a ton, I would assume. Just thinking about, I guess with the Mavs, he's played.
Last year he had an awesome playoffs. That's what sticks in my mind for it, but not
Okay.
in general, probably not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not too much experience in general. I know he played, with New York for a while, so he's not getting a lot there. But yeah, I like Reggie Bullock a lot. I think that he would be, like I said, I think he sticks in that frame of 3-and-D guys. Like you really don't get a lot of genuine 3-and-D guys. I think he fits there. And just another shooter off the bench, a guy that's not afraid to jack it up. So, like Reggie Bullock, I'm not in love. I'm not enamored by him the way I was like a year ago. Like his name was popping up a lot last year, and we were all like,
Mhm.
let's do it right now, right now, right now. I think he's a guy that would really fit in here nicely. And if that were the asking price, I think that's something that I could see them doing. Like that's a trade I could like actually see happen. I think Thibault fits nicely in Dallas. I
Yeah.
feel like there's been a connection there before as well. So who knows? Maybe that's something I could see happening.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm in love with Reggie Bullock, but I'm pretty close to it. I'm a
Okay.
huge fan. He started off the year super cold from 3. He
Yeah.
shot in the low 20s. There was a one metric, Thibault, who also started the year off crazy cold. There was a metric where 2 of them were like bottom 5 in 3-point percentage based on wings or whatever. And he's gotten somewhat better in it, but still has been somewhat of a not great year for him. He kind of hasn't just had his role as much. The Mavericks, I mean, he's in a pretty good spot for like the role he plays. So it wouldn't shock me if they want to hold on to him, but they need to do something, make some sort of move. Matisse has some of that like eye popping kind of pizzazz that they might try and go for, bring something to that team. I would absolutely pull the trigger on that and make that a 2-for-1 deal. And I like Bullock a whole lot. He has some sort of Philly ties too that I
Yeah.
know I forget exactly what it was, but there was some weird thing on Instagram that he kind of threw up this year that everyone made much more
Yeah.
out of it than it actually was. But yeah, I would take Reggie in a second.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. I think he fits the mold of guys that they're potentially looking for and what the type of the guy that would slide into this rotation. Like I said, I think just a little bit of a different aspect from Melton, not as like vibrant as a defender, but a guy that can stick it down. I know that he's going to be able to, shoot it at a good rate, maybe not outrageously high like I feel he was for a portion last year. But even like you said, in that playoff run, he was fantastic. And like we've talked about with all the shooters, he's a guy that's not afraid to shoot it. And with Harden, he makes all those guys better. So would love it here.
Yeah, totally. And I lied. I'm throwing one more name at you here. Andre Drummond. Do you want a Andre Drummond reunion? $3.2 million cap hit. And tie this into how do you feel about the backup center position as it stands?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the backup center because it's a weird situation right now. Um, no, not really. Like he does stuff. I like him. I like Drummond better than Harrell. Um, and I
Okay.
think that like just as a reasonable backup, just a regular season guy, he makes Drummond makes more sense. Um, but like again, playoff time rolls around. Like, are either of those guys viable options to
Right.
play defense in the playoffs? I think the answer for both of them is no. So I think that's the discrepancy you're running into. Is this going to have to be a situation where we take 3 or 4 games to figure out that Paul Reed is the answer to those questions? I don't know. But I think there's a lot of love for Drummond here. He was a lot of fun to have. I actually really enjoyed him here, and I think the team liked him a lot. He also, I think, would be a beast offensively with Harden in a pick and roll. I think he'd be fine. But I mean, not anything that Montrez doesn't really do. So I don't
Mhm.
know. It's kind of whatever. Unless they're moving on from Harrell, I really don't see them bringing in Drummond. Especially similar cap hits, right? I guess Harrell's a little bit lower though.
Yeah, Harrell's on a minimum. Drummond's like a little bit above that. Neither one of them are moving the meter too much for me. I'm out on Andre Drummond coming back to the Sixers, and it surprised me the amount of fans he has within like
Yeah,
the Sixers community and people that like him. And I like Drummond as a person, as a teammate. I think he was very good while his time here. We still did not get the Andre Drummond playoff experience, and I think that was a good thing. And
yeah,
for those 4 brief games that the Brooklyn Nets were in the playoffs last year, it was rough looking. He was batting balls out to the 3-point line. He was not catching clean. And he's another guy that just can't hold up in the postseason. We've talked all about how the game changes. I'm completely satisfied with remembering Andre Drummond finally, not
yep,
rekindling that. And they're also like the moments where he just tried to do too much and throw like ridiculous passes. Like it was charming at times. Like that he didn't cut that out in the postseason. He did not
no,
stop that when it mattered most. So yeah, we can keep that away from here and remember him fondly in my mind.
yeah. I was gonna say there were some funny times. There were some funny,
Oh yeah.
and sometimes it worked. The thing about it was like every so often he would throw a ridiculous pass and it would work. It would go through somebody's legs or he would throw it behind the back, and then it would be like, oh my god, I can't believe he did that. But he's never gonna stop trying. I think is a problem that we run into with him. But yeah, I'm good. I think they could upgrade there, but I don't know where that is or
Yeah.
who. We're running into the same problem that we've kind of run into for a while.
Yeah, it's free B-ball Paul, man, and shout out the people with the free B-ball Paul sign behind the bench. That was absolutely awesome. I forget their name. They tweeted right back at me after giving me a shout out, but they made sure Doc Rivers saw that. That was great. I fully
Yeah.
support it, and yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna throw a couple quick trades at you, James, and then we'll get out of here. First one, a guy I think is a little bit more reachable on that Jazz team, Rudy Gay for Furkan and Jaden Springer. What do you think?
Sure. Rudy Gay, I don't know, man. I don't know how much he has left in the tank.
Okay.
He's looked old from what we've seen. And I guess that is kind of the situation we're at here. Like, I like Jaden Springer. I think that in 2 years he could be like a contributing player, maybe a little
Long
bit
time.
next year.
It's a long
It's
time.
a long way away, right? I could. There's still a lot of love in my heart for Furkan, but I really could give, you know, two whatever's about Furkan and where he ends up, whatever it is, he's going to be gone. I think by the end of this season. So, um, yeah, I think that would be fine. I think Rudy Gobert is a guy that could come in, another veteran leader, a guy that's been in the playoffs, a guy that's been around the block a handful of times. But he's also a guy that's very old, and that really hasn't really shown too much in terms of like physical athletic ability anymore. And
Yeah.
his game was predicated on that. Like that's I think the biggest thing. He was an
Yeah.
athletic wing that got up and down the floor, that dunked, that used his athleticism to get shots off. I don't think that's there anymore.
Yeah, that's all fair. I like Rudy Gay. $6.2 million cap hit. He's got a player option next year, which is also appealing to me. I think he probably wants to stick around with a contender. If things go well, I could see that being like a more than a year rental, which is also appealing. This year, 14.9 minutes per game, averaging 4.3 points, 3.0 rebounds, shooting just 21.5% from three. But
Ouch.
he is a 34.6% career 3-point shooter. So I guess we can bank on that coming up again if you want to look at it through positive light. None of these trades that I've gone through or been able to pick out are like this is the one that gets the Sixers
Yeah.
over the edge. This isn't that either, but I wouldn't mind tossing around. I would rather the Reggie Bullock trade than I would this. I'll say that.
Yeah, I think so as well. I don't know. I mean, if it's Furkan, like, do you have to throw Springer in there? Like, if it was a Furkan for Rudy Gay, like, essentially straight up, like, sure.
Okay.
But I don't know. Like, I think Springer has value. I think there's potential there. I think a team values Jaden Springer to a certain degree. I don't think Rudy Gay's worth giving up on that yet.
Springer's played the fewest minutes of any player in his draft class or any first round pick. I'm sorry.
Okay,
That's
that makes
yeah.
sense, I guess. And
Yeah.
he's still a baby. He is still a child. He is still very young. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna give up. I'm not gonna give up on Jaden quite yet.
Okay. I respect it. We'll move on to this one. Another one in which Jaden Springer is also in the mix. Uh, this circles a little bit back to our backup center conversation, but two guys of different flavor than what the Sixers have. Jaden Springer and Furkan Korkmaz to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Kenrick Williams and Mike Muscala.
100%.
Okay. Wow.
100%. Kendrick Williams, 100%.
I thought you liked
Mike
him.
Muscala, Mike Muscala is whatever. Sure, I think it would be funny to have him back. I think
Bring him
the second
home.
he stepped in, yeah, the second he steps into a game here, he's getting a massive standing ovation,
No
and I
doubt.
think that alone is worth it. Like bringing him back alone just for that moment would be worth it. He doesn't even have to play another minute. But the second he got in the game, but again, add a guy that I mean, he's whatever. He's probably not going to get minutes late in the season, but for here and there, for a different splash, for something new, I'm totally cool with that. I think Kenrich Williams is a guy that's super underrated, great defender, a guy that's smart, high IQ player. Kenrich
Strong.
Williams, super strong, versatile defender, 2 through 4, can even guard 5, connector on the defensive end. Super. Oh, I'd love that. I would love that. I would be super happy with that. That's the one. If you're talking about which one would be the one,
Wow.
if they're able to do that, Kenrich Williams is very, very good. I like him a lot. Um, I think OKC values him higher than that though. I don't think that would get it done.
Yeah, that's possible. I'm surprised that wasn't what I expected you to get super excited about, but I do respect it. Mike Muscala, that shot that brought us Tyrese
Yeah.
Maxey, is one of the most important shots in Sixers history, I would argue. So he deserves the utmost respect, and I would love to have him in a Sixers uniform because of that. Yeah, I like Henrik Williams as well. I think he'd be a positive addition. I think I am looking at this is I weigh center last on my list, and I know we've talked so much about a backup center, but I think I'd rather get wing help and then maybe an
Yeah.
additional point guard. And I still believe in B-ball Paul come postseason. I'm gonna ride that until it bites the
Yeah.
Sixers. It didn't last year. That was not the reason that they struggled in the playoffs. He did absolutely fine in his job. I think he's gotten slightly better this year, and I'm ready to give him the keys this year once again. I hope he gets extended opportunity so that is the case. But if that isn't the feeling within the organization, which there's signs that that might be the case, this is something that I could see making sense. So I don't know. It's very possible that they would take more than that, as you alluded to. But yeah, something to think about for sure. And last one, I'm gonna toss at you here. Shake Milton and Jaden Springer to the Charlotte Hornets for Jalen McDaniels and Nick Richards.
Sure. I like McDaniels. I think when you think about wing depth, defense wise, I think he's a guy that can handle all of that stuff. Nick Richards, uh, did he play at Kentucky with Tyrese?
Yes, I believe they were the same year. He's definitely a
Okay.
Kentucky guy. I'm gonna check. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
he might have been the year after. There's a likelihood that he's a year after. But regardless, young center could be a guy that they could mold into being, the guy going forward. But yeah, I don't mind that. I think I guess the situation becomes like, do you value McDaniel's higher than Milton? I don't know what his contract looks like. He might have an extra year or two of team control there. So again, wouldn't hate that. I think that McDaniels adds something different from what Shake does, and what Shake does is a little bit redundant on this team, especially once you start cutting the rotations down.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a here or there. I'm not too happy or upset if that goes through, but I can see it happening.
Yeah, and Richards did play with Tyrese Maxey at Kentucky, so there is some familiarity there.
There you
Richards
go.
is about as normal backup center as you can get,
Yeah,
but
true.
he can do a little bit. He's a little bit of a lob threat. He can catch that. That's
Yeah,
something that would be nice on this lineup. Jalen McDaniels, I think, is the worst of the two McDaniels brothers for
true.
sure. But he still is an element or a layer that the Sixers don't have as far as athletic wing, switchable, can do a little bit. I think he's kind of notably worse than his brother,
Yeah,
unfortunately, but it is something that I could see making sense. And if you're kind of swinging for the bottom of the barrel, like McDaniels, I think is worth a flyer as a two-way guy over Matisse or Furkan, which is kind of what I'm looking for in an upgrade here. So something I think is worth considering at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that these are, maybe we're not right here in terms of exactly what the trades are or which players they are, but when you're looking at this season, where they're going to upgrade and how so, I think that's the type of range you're looking at there. Nobody's going to be, you're not getting another starter. Like these starters are set. Probably the top 7 or 8 are set. You're looking to get those guys that could contribute to to a deeper playoff run, could hop in, due to an injury or something. And I think that these guys are all valuable. If you're talking about like a Reggie Bullock or even a Kenrich Williams, I think both of those guys would be super value in a playoff run. So we'll see. I think that those are a lot to think about here. We're 2.5, 3 weeks away from the trade deadline.
Yeah. So things are heating up now. I'm sure we'll touch more on this as it comes clear.
Absolutely.
The Sixers stay hot as well. So yeah, appreciate all you guys for tuning in. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And me and James will talk with you next time.